My name is Emma Funk. I'm a third-year PhD student here at MUSC. I'm 24 years old and I've been an ovarian cancer survivor for 8 years now. Leading up to my diagnosis when I was 16, I didn't have any risk factors that we knew of, at least for ovarian cancer, but it's hard to know the risk factors and the signs of symptoms when you don't even know that ovarian cancer is a thing that you can get. I remember the first time realizing that you could get cancer on your ovaries was when I was told that I had cancer on my ovaries, which looking back now, working in a cancer lab is kind of silly because I know that you can get cancer anywhere. But you don't know what you don't know until you know it. So I was I would say, I played sports my whole life. I wasn't overweight. Before my diagnosis, I hadn't drank, I hadn't smoked, I hadn't done anything that would put me at risk of developing something like this. We didn't have like a history, at least that, I was told of breast or ovarian cancer. My grandpa died of glioblastoma a couple years earlier, but that was really it. I would say that my biggest symptom looking back on it now after obviously working with groups and educating myself about signs and symptoms, I pretty much presented with every single textbook symptom of ovarian cancer that you can have. So bloating for sure was one of them, and it wasn't just the type of bloating that happens around your period or after you eat a big meal. I looked like I was 5 or 6 months pregnant, and I would stand in the shower and I couldn't even see my toes, which was kind of insane just because I've always been someone who's I guess carried their weight in their legs, which I know sounds silly, but I've always had a relatively flat stomach. So when I started growing and I was losing weight, because I started going to the gym more because I was like, oh, I guess I'm just gaining weight, I'm 16, happens. My stomach wasn't going down, but everything else was. That was kind of weird to me. I was going to the bathroom, urinating frequently, constipated, and then I would say my other biggest abnormal symptom was I was getting full so quickly, which was so not of my character. I have never had an issue eating. That's never been an issue for me. I've always been able to, power through and have dessert after. That's never been a problem, me being too full. But it was to the point where I would eat 4 bites of a meal and feel like I had just eaten a 5 or 6 course dinner. I was so full. So I was losing weight everywhere else. And it took about until January of my junior year to get to a point where my mom looked at me and she goes, you look like you're 6 months, 7 months pregnant, and I know that you're not, so we need to figure out what's going on. We had thought it was a gluten intolerance basically, and I had changed my diet kind of because that's kind of before we got to that point where okay, we need to see a doctor. My mom was like, you probably just have celiac like your Aunt Beth has. I was like, you're so right. So I had cut actually gluten and dairy out of my diet leading up to that, and obviously nothing helped, because cutting gluten and dairy out isn't going to stop a tumor growing, unfortunately. So I remember it was MLK Day. We went and saw my physician. It was 9:00 at night. I had just been at a tournament that whole weekend. He took me in. He sent me to go do a urine sample in the bathroom. He asked my mom, is there any chance at all that she's pregnant? Because that's what this is looking at. And my mom was like, absolutely not. So we got sent across the street for me to get an ultrasound. And I'm still at this point thinking I have a gluten intolerance until the tech came back over for a second side and did my right side again, and that's kind of when I realized that I think this is a bigger issue than what we thought it was. So we went over to the emergency room, and at this point it's midnight, and I'm I gotta be at school the next morning. Can we hurry this shit up? And I don't even remember what they did at the hospital, honestly, but I do remember sitting in the bed and the doctor coming in and saying that I had a tumor the size of a basketball growing on what they think was my ovary. They weren't going to be able to be sure until they took it out. There was a really high chance that I would have to have both of my ovaries removed and possibly go through chemotherapy and radiation and cancer treatment. And at that point, they didn't know if it was benign or malignant, and I didn't know what benign or malignant meant. All I heard was tumor, and I was like, there's no way that I have cancer. That's not real. And I kind of just, I don't know. I was definitely scared a little bit, but I just remember thinking to myself that if I look like I'm scared, like it's only gonna make it so much worse for my parents, you know? So I was just kind of like, from there on out, I started making like jokes about the whole thing, and I would like named my tumor, and I kept asking if I'd be able to like take it home and like put it in a jar, and they were like, you can't do that. And I was like, okay. So short story long, basically I ended up going in for surgery 2 months after, or not 2 months, 2 weeks. And I got extremely lucky in the fact that I was able to have the entire tumor surgically removed because it was stage 1. They made an incision from about here to here on my stomach. So I still have the scar today from that. And they took out the tumor, which ended up weighing like 8 pounds, and my right ovary. So I only have my left ovary now. And I think they took out my appendix too. But that was an interesting experience because after I went through that, I kind of was like, oh, I'm done, you know, because the thought of, you know, it had been spreading undetectable, or I didn't know anything about that. So my plan was to get MRIs and blood work every 4 months, 6 months, a year, and that was going to happen for 6 years. So my freshman year of college, I came home for Christmas and everything, and that's when we had timed up to get my blood work and scans done. And I got a call from my mom on New Year's Eve, and she said that my CA-125, which was one of the biomarkers I was getting, had shot from like 60 to 300, and they thought that there was a chance that the cancer was back. And that was almost harder to hear than the initial being told that there was a tumor growing, because I hadn't even processed about, you know, I just thought got surgery and I was done. You know, the actual being like a cancer patient almost for the rest of your life, you know, I didn't think about that. And then it became really real in the sense that I was still only 18 and I still only had one ovary. So I thought that, you know, like, what if they have to remove the other ovary? Like, would I rather do chemotherapy and like, you know, try to save that ovary, or am I gonna just like want to get it taken out and like figure it down the road? And like, you know, do I really care that much about having biological children? Which is all kind of crazy to think about when you're 18, but those are just decisions that, especially women that are younger diagnosed with ovarian cancer, like we have to think about and we have to make. Luckily it was just a cyst and my levels had just rose, but that I think kind of sparked something that I wasn't really prepared for, and that was definitely my development of health anxiety after. I just got really freaked out at the idea that there could be something growing in me and I would never know about it. And I got this like obsession with wanting to like be on top of everything. And if anything ever felt wrong, I would go to my doctor. I'd be like, I need an ultrasound. And they're like, no, you don't. I'm like, no, like I'm telling you, like I need an ultrasound. There's something wrong. And there was never anything wrong. And that was something that wasn't talked about to me as something that like could happen or like was normal. And it was never asked about like at any of my follow-ups, like mentally how I was doing and stuff. And it made honestly me feel kind of crazy because I would like talk to my mom about it and she's like, what if you just stopped thinking like that? And I was like, you're so right. I should just stop, duh. But I couldn't. And it really didn't subdue until I actually sought psychological counseling and I talked to someone and they were like, that's a very normal thing for cancer patients to develop, is anxiety and health anxiety. I think getting connected with other survivor groups and realizing that these thoughts aren't abnormal for people to have, and working with the women here has given me like a sense of purpose as to, you know, like how I can take this and, you know, try to help other people. And then also something that helped too is going and seeing CAPS and getting on medication for my anxiety. Yeah, so I would say if there's anything I wish you would take away from my story, it's that, you know, obviously the care that you receive to treat the cancer is important, but there's a whole other aspect of then, you know, being a cancer survivor and what you carry with you from there on out that also I think could be, you know, we could do more to support people through that. Because even just as being like, this is a normal thought to have and you're not crazy and you're not by yourself, or talking to people that understand it, can be super helpful in the long term. So, yeah, thanks for listening to my story. I hope you all learned something today, and if you have any questions about anything, you can always feel free to reach out to me. I'm in BSB all the time, so